This is fascinating. I've studied a lot lately, Ross, about um, just the gut brain connection, like that kind of stuff. And obviously, there's some ties to the garden, but I
Mm.
was not aware about the topic of today's conversation at all.
Yeah, well, you've probably heard the phrase, you are what you eat. I think we're also thinking you are what you breathe in,
Mm.
and that we believe that the rich microbial soup that is in nature tops up some of the beneficials that we have. So we breathe in microbes that then colonize our gut and then affect the health of that gut. And by doing so, they kind of helping us in two different elements of our health. So the first one is as a child, you're challenging your immune system. So you're breathing in from things from the natural world, and you're learning what's good and bad, and your body's building up resistance to the bad ones, and it's kind of utilizing the good ones. And it's worth just saying that 45% of your body is human, the rest is microbial.
Mm.
So you're a walking city. You're not a human with your own decisions. There is discussion to be made about how your body moves forward with your microbial friends. So the first one is it basically builds up our immunity, and the second one is the gut. The microbes in the gut affect the regulation of hormone levels, and hormone levels affect our health, our mental health. So the whole, the adrenaline, the endorphins, and things like that, we think are linked between that, as you mentioned, that brain gut axis. So we call it the atmosphere gut brain axis. It's three elements coming. And the thing about the plants is that we believe that the closer you get to rich organic soils and the closer you get to natural ecosystems, the more benefits, the more beneficial organisms you're breathing in. So living in a sterile environment could be one of the mechanisms of why we're impacting on our poor health.
That is fascinating to me. I've heard a bit, about the impact of, let's say, playing in the soil, hands in the soil, some of the microbes that can
Yeah.
then, of course, access the body from there. I had not, I guess, thought about the quality of the air, right? Both negatively and positively. I guess I'd only thought about it in the negative sense,
Yeah.
right? Is there a toxin or a pollutant in the air? Not is there perhaps some level of microbe or yeast maybe floating around that is actually good to have.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the phrase or the term hormesis, right? Where a small introduction of something like theoretically harmful actually produces like a stimulatory effect. It
Yeah.
sounds like that's kind of what's going on,
Yeah,
right?
it's training the body's immune system. So if you're not exposed to these things, including pollen, so if you've never experienced pollen as young, and then you may be more prone to hay fever and things later on. So it's just about getting the right kind of dose and mix of doses that the body learns from and adapts. It's not about overdosing it or not giving it that stimulation in the first place.
So how does this tie into something practical myself or those listening might be able to do in the garden? I know we want to talk about some shade plants, some climbing plants. How does that all connect?
Well, we think that the plants are also a source of these beneficial microbes. So the research, which was done by one of my PhD students called Jake Robinson, is that as you move closer to the soil, you get more of the beneficials. So there's a vertical profile, but also as you move closer to a tree or a climber or something that's up at your height, up at your where you're breathing, there's also a kind of plume of beneficials around that too. So you can imagine walking through a forest, you've got all these things in this sort of still air around the trees. So those sort of shady or vertical greenery around you seems to help breathe in the beneficials. And one of the reasons why we think kids have probably got a better immune system, so your immune system kind of gets worse when you reach your sort of 20s and things, is we may just be physically further away from where these beneficial top ups are, where the feeding station is, as it were, because it's around the soil and it's around the plants.
I read a article a while ago about the practice of Japanese forest walking,
Yeah.
and how that was supposed to have a positive effect on the immune response and stress. I had never tied. I thought maybe it was just the environment itself, maybe the visual stimulus, the
Yeah.
audio stimulus would maybe lower cortisol or something like that. It sounds like obviously maybe that's happening, but at the same time, I had never thought about the I guess the density of microbial life in the air relative to where you are, where your mouth, I guess, is in the air,
Yeah.
right?
So the forest bathing, we call it forest bathing in the UK, is exactly analysis, and it's the same process, except you're breathing in specific organic molecules from the plant directly. So it's the essential oils really off the trees that you're breathing in, and they have again two processes. So they regulate hormonal level. You can reduce adrenaline, for example, by a walk in the wood, and they've done studies in Japan where they actually remove the trees and just give you the chemical, and you get the same effect. So we know it's a
Oh,
direct biochemical effect. And then you've got this whole idea of inducing immune responses. So what they call killer T cells. So
yeah,
the basically the
yeah.
body's defense mechanisms against cancer forming. That again is also induced by these volatile chemicals from the trees.
Let's say I had a dirt lot in my backyard and equate that to maybe the bubble boy sort of way of living, very sterile, no connection, no interaction. And I said, I don't want to live this way anymore. I want to, I suppose, get as close to forest bathing as I can in my own environment. What approach should I start to take there to craft that?
Well, we think that the analogy for microbial richness and even organic molecule richness is very similar to the idea of biodiversity. So if you have a really rich floral meadow, if you have a really dynamic woodland, we think you're probably going to get better microbial action. So it's the whole sort of holistic approach. The more the merrier. The more connections, the more interactions you have in nature is probably relating to a healthier environment. So covering our gardens in plastic or concrete or even a kind of monoculture of grass or something is probably a lot less beneficial than this dynamic mix of what nature's providing it as this cocktail, as I call it.
Would you know of any studies or even have a hypothesis on obviously certain cultures evolve and grow up in certain areas of the world, right? So if I perhaps was a desert people, I would not perhaps have obviously all of the VOCs that are coming out of the forest.
Yeah.
And so would I be at a strict disadvantage, do you think? Or is it just perhaps that I'm now acclimated to a different set of
You're acclimated to a
compounds?
different set. So we know when it comes to, we talked about the sort of gut biome. So we know that if you're an indigenous Amazonian Indian, then you will have a much better microbiome. You'll be much richer and more resilient than somebody like you and
Yeah.
I, who are used to an urban lifestyle. And if we're just fast food eating all the time,
Yeah.
our microbiome's pretty damaged. So again, it's the diet, but it's also the environment. So if you're eating fruit and nuts and vegetables and roots and
Yeah.
scrubbing around in the soil, you're much more likely to have a stronger profile.
Are there any plants you think someone could, getting back to practicality, could someone go into a backyard, maybe their backyard, and just put a specific type of plant in the ground that would give them a good head start here?
The smelly ones are the ones to think about. So that whole aromatherapy, essential oils. So your citruses, if you're in a Mediterranean type climate, your citruses, your lavenders, the things that are we've known for a while that have a bath with that, you kind of feel a bit more soothed. So on the volatiles, those plants definitely. If you're talking about the microbes, I think cultivating the soil, having trees and climbers, vines around you, all will help. So our patio now has plants at the edge of it. So if you just sit out, you're actually only a few inches away from a leaf.
Yeah.
So it's about not following the idea slavishly. Still create a garden you want, but just try and get as much dynamism and as much variety in it as possible, I think.
Watch the full episode right here and subscribe for more new episodes every single week.